Just so you know, this episode contains some strong fucking language, so if you're not into that thing, then go somewhere else. So, I am in the process of moving. Second time in a year. The entire rental industry is evil and abhorrent and sums up a number of the monstrous ills within our capitalist society. So I've got that going for me. Still, yeah, I've got a bit of time before the moving van arrives, so why don't I just grab a film completely at random from this box? Hey. Let's grab a glass of our favourite luminous orange beverage and talk about T2, Trainspotting. In 1993, the incredibly Scottish Irvine Welsh released his first novel, Trainspotting. Various vignettes in the lives of three heroin addicts, Renton, Sickboy and Spud, and their psychotic criminal friend Begbie in Leith, Edinburgh. Its unflinching look at the dark subject matter and the incredible Scottish dialect style of the writing. The sweat was lashing off his Sickboy. He was trembling. I was just sitting there focusing on the telly trying not to notice the cunt. He was bringing me down. I tried to keep my attention on the Jean-Claude Van Damme video. Made it an enormous success. A film adaptation was always going to be fairly inevitable. 1996 saw the film Trainspotting, directed by Danny Boyle and starring Ewan McGregor, Johnny Lee Miller, Ewan Bremner and Robert Carlyle. This film is a cult classic. Known for some stylish visuals, great performances and a faithful recreation of the majority of the book, it was pretty successful back in the day, and its fans love it. Though, did you know that for the American release, the actors dubbed back over the first 20 minutes of the film to make the accents more accessible? No judgments or anything, America, just saying. Then there was a second book in 2002, Porno, so the main characters all return, and it's about making a porn film, and it's weird and good. Not nearly as successful as the first one, but it has its own unique charm. But hey, why don't we put up the original cover for Porno a sec, while I have a nice refreshing sip of my iron brew. Because people weren't embarrassed enough about reading a book called Porno. Naturally, some conversation started to arise about a sequel to the film. People were very eager to see it, but it was sitting around not getting picked up for a long time. It was taking so long that 2 more books would come out before the sequel would finally emerge. Skag Boys came out in 2012, and then The Blade Artist, a spin-off focusing only on Begbie, came out in 2016. They're also really good and you should read them. Read more books, people. Books are fun. Then, in 2017, T2, Trainspotting, finally came out. And from this point on we'll be calling it Trainspotting 2 because that's just easier. It had taken a long time to put together. There had been a falling out between Ewan McGregor and Danny Boyle for a while, and the actors were busy and etc etc. But they finally got together and made it. It initially started as a straight-up adaptation of Porno, but no one liked that script. It works as a book, but I can't imagine it translating that well to the screen. It's Terry's cock. It looks like he's raptured the fucker. It's crumpled and it's black and blue and red. He's screaming and Nick is phoning an ambulance on a mobby and I'm thinking, the fucking Sunday Mail. What the fuck are we going to do if his cock's knackered? He's my leading fucking man. So instead they worked it into something different. Something more meaningful. And that's what we'll be looking at today. The way this film reflects very interestingly on nostalgia. There have been a lot of sequels in the past few years to films that were out 20 years or more ago. It's an ongoing trend that has led to some really interesting films, and some decidedly uninteresting ones. And honestly, Trainspotting was a perfect fit for this kind of thing. It has a dedicated audience, many of whom felt pretty defined by it, who would be about the same age as these characters going back into it. This film quite intelligently focuses on that built-in nostalgia as its major theme, and I'd like to look into how each of the 4 main characters experiences that nostalgia. The film opens with Renton having a minor heart attack while running on a treadmill in the life he's made for himself since stealing the money at the end of the first movie. Following on from this, he returns to Edinburgh, where he reunites with his father and his old friends Spud and Sickboy. His journey back into his past is inspired by his life hitting a low point. His wife is leaving him, he's about to lose his job, and following on from his heart attack and the surgery the doctors performed on him, he has a whole life ahead of him that he doesn't know what to do with.
2 or 3, fine, I'll take that, I can cope with that. I can think of enough things to do to piss away what remains, but 30, what am I supposed to do with that? I'm 46 and I'm fucked!
And so he starts hanging out with Sickboy, working together with him in his plan to turn his pub into a brothel. In doing this, the two reignite a friendship that has been dead for 20 years, and instantly they're back to remembering everything about how things used to be. And in the immediate at least, it makes them feel happier. We see images of the characters' childhood scattered throughout the film at various low moments. First, when Renton has his heart attack, we see them playing football. a moment of physical weakness when he is ultimately alone, mirrored with a moment of childhood health when all his friends were around. Then, following on from Sick Boy and Renton's fight in the pub, we see them as kids at a party, adult anger reflected into childhood happiness. Then, in the climax, when Renton is locked in the literal room of self-reflection, with Begbie after him on the outside, he tries to distract him with the story of how they first met in primary school.
Mind that, Franco? You were older. You'd been kept back.
I mind that well enough.
In the most terrifying moment possible, he uses nostalgia, their shared childhood memories, to try and save his skin. This is something that we as humans tend to do. It's pretty common for nostalgia to tie into our more depressed moments in life. For as long as we've had the term nostalgia, it has been correlated with being depressed. Nostalgia comes from the Greek words for home and ache. Literally, it means a longing for home. It was originally diagnosed in Swiss soldiers in the 1700s who were missing their home while at war. As time went on, psychologists started to also associate this with the feeling of looking back on our childhoods. It was only as recently as 1999 that nostalgia was officially no longer classed as a medical disorder. That's right, as recently as 20 years ago, if looking back on your childhood memories gave you the warm tinglies, then you officially had a mental disorder. So, for as long as it has existed, nostalgia has been correlated with depression. Not always, but often. So, when Renton hits this low point where he has no idea what to do with his future, he retreats into his past. But then he hits that bittersweet thing where you go back, and even though things are the same, they aren't the same. While he's been gone, Edinburgh has gone through a lot of urban development. There's far more corporations around, and the city has become more multicultural. He's greeted at the airport by a woman from Slovenia, and a major character in the plot is Veronica, who comes from Bulgaria. It's the same, but not the same. When he goes back to his childhood home, he learns that his mother has passed away, which leads to this magnificent shot, mirroring a visual from the original, to clearly display the loss of something he looks back on and remembers. Heightening this feeling is the cinematography when he goes into his bedroom. You ever get that feeling when you see something that seemed so huge when you were a kid, and you go back and you realise that it's actually not? Everything feels smaller. Everything in this bedroom scene is framed very much to make it look small. It evokes exactly that feeling without ever needing a character to say it out loud. One nice little touch they have to elevate this idea is the way they reuse certain songs from the first film's legendary soundtrack. But they didn't just use the same song, they used remixes. The same, but not the same. What we remember, but subtly different. When we meet Sick Boy in this film, he's doing what he always does, trying to rip people off for his own benefit, exploiting the people around him in degrading fashion that I can't show in this video because censoring nudity is hard work. From there we see him running his pub, which is miserable and empty and barely makes any money. He's fallen so far from the heights he thinks he should have hit that he can't understand it. You see, he peaked pretty young and has fallen into a mediocre existence as a result. So how does he use his memories? To try and exploit someone. He plays on Renton's nostalgia kick to try and get him onto his side so he can make money out of it. Interestingly, the memory that he tries to use to instill this feeling in him and Renton is the first time they scored heroin. Because Trainspotting. So, is Sick Boy representative of film studios here? Because he's trying to use memories of things once loved to make a quick buck, and he isn't very good at it because he's hopped up on so much cocaine. I'm probably reaching, but you see it, right? Begbie has spent the last 20 years in prison. He's missed out on essentially his whole adult life. So when he gets out through unconventional methods, he wants to go straight back to his old life as if nothing changed. For him, that's a life of violence, cruelty and robbery. Because Trainspotting. For him, there is only this past. That's all he has to live for. So he reacts badly when he's confronted with new ideas, like his son not wanting to be a criminal, instead choosing to go to college for a hotel management course, forcing him to go and rob houses with him, and then getting into an argument with him when he rejects this life. Begbie remembers loving what he did when he was young, and is so mired in that love of it that he thinks his son must follow in his footsteps and won't accept any kind of relationship where he doesn't. His entire identity is defined by his vision of what things were like back in the day. Robbing houses, hanging out with his old criminal associate Mikey Forrester, played by the book's author Irvin Welsh. As a side note, I find it absolutely hilarious that after getting cast as Forrester in the first movie, Irvin Welsh wrote a section into Porno where Forrester gets cast in the porn movie because he has a big penis. And taking great pleasure in violence. In fact, such great pleasure The cutting Renton's arm in a chase is the only way he can get an erection. The movie definitely portrays defining your entire identity around the past like this as a very negative way to live, because you get so focused on how good you think things were that you can't see the negative side of it. It just so happens that Begbie's idea of the good side in his past is ultra-violence. So, just as a quick heads up, this section contains some suicide imagery, which, if that is a trigger for you, there is a time code down in the description to skip past that imagery. I'm going to stay here for a few seconds longer just to point down to that. Okay, Spud has spent most of his life on heroin, ruining it in all the ways you'd expect it to. He's separated from his wife and son, he has no job, no prospects and nothing to live for, so he tries to kill himself, until a reminder of his past turns up when Renton saves him. Renton suggests to him that he needs to find something else to get addicted to so he can get better. He tries boxing, but it doesn't go so well, and as he's leaving the gym, he sees his past running by him. This inspires him to start writing stories of his youth. These are essentially just Trainspotting. It's a classic example of using art as therapy, but it's also a very specific case of him using the past to escape his awful situation. This is another thing they show very visually, with the spectre of his addiction looming over him as he writes. Which, I mean, the cinematography in this movie is just so good. His use of memory to escape like this goes similarly with Renton's use of it. They're both in low places and seeking some kind of way to save themselves by revelling in their past, but Spud is at least creating something with his nostalgia, and I think this is the most honest evaluation of his younger days. I mean, it even gets through to Begbie. Begbie reads Spud's stories, and at first they encourage his love of the past.
That lassie got glass, and no cunt leaves here till I find out what cunt did it. Lassie got glass, and no cunt leaves here till I find out what cunt did it.
But then, he reads one about seeing an old alcoholic in Leith Central Station, who turns out to be his father. This gets him to go and apologise to his son for the way he's treated him. So, seeing something that breaks through his idealised notion of how his past was, and reveals a difficult truth to him, convinces him to, at least in this one area, let go of his concept of how things should be, and let his son choose his own path not defined by his father's clouded memory. Trainspotting 2 is a film about going home again and revisiting old memories. It uses its position in the recent trend of nostalgia sequels to actually make that a major theme of the narrative and characters. While it can be said to retread old ground in certain senses, it does so intentionally to bring about a deep poignancy within its characters. It says that looking back to the past can be both helpful and harmful. It can give you a renewed sense of purpose, or it can get you so stuck in a certain idea about yourself that you follow it down paths that affect you badly as a person. It coins a term I love to describe this idea of going back to try and find the answers to your problems.
Nostalgia. That's why you're here. You're a tourist in your own youth.
Because ultimately, much as we might like to relive ideas out of our past, we can watch our old favourite movies, or we can go back to our old hometown, we can pore over photo albums. We can never really go back for real. We can only visit. Nostalgia can be both a good thing and a bad thing, depending on how you experience it. Trainspotting 2 looks at it from multiple angles in interesting ways, and it's one I think I'll be revisiting once I get older and start looking back to my life now. Hopefully by that point the revolution will have swept our nation and all the landlords shall face swift retribution at the hands of Madame Guillotine. Or at the very least, I won't be surrounded by boxers. That was awesome. I have a nice refreshing sap of... Yeah, refreshing sap. Nice refreshing... You see it? This is the bit I'm getting wrong. Do one more before I fucking ruin everything. Ugh. The spit take seems like a funny idea on paper, but it is everywhere. It is everywhere. Thank you so much for watching this video about Trainspotting 2 and nostalgia. Be sure to click on the things, let me know what you thought of the video in a comment. This one took a bit longer to put together than I was expecting, not because of any reason of the research or anything, just because I was expecting to move house like 2 weeks ago and here I still am. Ah.